My God, you guys. Seriously, oh my God. At first, it just looked like rain, the kind Southern California sees all the time. It was just tapping on the windows, filling up the gutters, soaking the lawns. People were just going about their holidays, making coffee, wrapping presents, and checking their weather apps without really worrying about it. But then something just shifted. The rain didn't let up. Instead, it intensified. It was just storm stacking on top of storm, hour after hour. Before long, the streets stopped looking like roads and started looking more like rivers, moving with their own serious force. What started as your typical winter weather system suddenly morphed into a storm that nobody could ignore. Water started racing downhill from the mountains, dragging mud, rocks, and debris right along with it. Up in the San Gabriel Mountains, creeks that are usually just shallow trickles this time of year turned into roaring, chocolate-brown torrents. Lytle Creek surged way past its banks and actually tore out the only bridge connecting that community to the outside world. Over in Wrightwood, residents watched as hillsides, already stripped bare from past wildfires, just let go all at once. Landslides came crashing across roads that families had been driving on just hours earlier. It wasn't just flooding anymore. We were watching infrastructure fail in real time. Cars were getting swept off low crossings. Roads were buckling. Hillsides were sliding. And right in the middle of all that chaos were the people. Parents frantically trying to get to their kids for Christmas, travelers trapped in mountain cabins, and elderly residents watching the water creep closer and closer to their doorsteps. First responders were racing through the night while phones across the region lit up with evacuation orders, flash flood warnings, and even tornado alerts. This definitely wasn't the postcard version of Christmas. This was the year the rain turned into a runaway river. We're talking about a time when bridges just vanished, when entire neighborhoods found themselves completely cut off, and when communities had to prove just how tough they really were against water that refused to stop. Are you ready to see how all of this actually went down? To really understand how this disaster unfolded, you have to look at the storm itself. This wasn't just a single rain cloud passing through town. It was what meteorologists call a series of stacked atmospheric rivers, long, massive plumes of Pacific moisture stretching for thousands of miles across the ocean. Think of it like a literal river in the sky. And here is where it went wrong. Instead of moving quickly inland and clearing out, these storms just stalled right over Southern California. That meant hour after grueling hour of heavy rain hammering the exact same mountains, foothills, and neighborhoods. Forecasters had warned us that this could be the wettest Christmas in years. And man, were they right. That warm, moisture-loaded air slammed into the San Gabriel Mountains and was forced upward. As it rose, it cooled down and dumped rain at incredibly intense rates. In a lot of these communities, we saw 4 to 8 inches of rainfall in just a few days, with even higher totals up in the peaks. Now, that much water alone would have caused flooding. But there was another major problem. Earlier wildfires had burned away the vegetation that usually sucks up the rainfall and anchors the soil. What was left behind were these burn scar slopes, unstable and unable to absorb water. The rain just raced across the surface instead of soaking in. The result was a perfect recipe for disaster. Water rushed down the slopes, picking up mud, ash, rocks, and tree limbs, turning calm creeks into fast-moving debris flows. Drainage systems that work fine for ordinary storms were totally overwhelmed. Culverts got clogged instantly, and small roadside ditches turned into raging channels that undercut the pavement and collapsed entire sections of the road. What looked like just a patch of rain on a radar map had, down at ground level, turned into a destructive force that was reshaping the landscape in real time. And for the communities sitting at the base of these mountains, places like Lytle Creek and Wrightwood, they were standing directly in the path of everything gravity was pulling downhill. Just look way down there. You can see them coming one right after the other. The breaking point hit when the land and the infrastructure simply couldn't take it anymore. And the scary part is, it didn't happen slowly, it happened all at once. Over in Lytle Creek, that rising water ate away at the foundation of the only bridge leading in and out of the community. This bridge, which had carried school buses and work trucks for decades, started to crack, then buckle, and finally, it just collapsed into the raging creek below. Sections of asphalt peeled away like wet paper. Guardrails were twisted and sent washing downstream. Overnight, a functioning roadway turned into a gaping hole filled with rushing water where a bridge used to be. With that single failure, hundreds of residents were suddenly isolated. Not because they didn't want to leave, but because there was literally no way out. Elsewhere, the hillsides were soaked like sponges, and they finally just let go. In those burn scar areas, slopes that had been weakened by wildfire and baked by the sun released entire sheets of mud and rock. Debris flows roared across the highways, burying lanes in several feet of thick sludge and bringing traffic to a dead stop. Culverts got clogged with branches and boulders. Drainage channels overflowed. Roads warped, cracked, and in some places simply disappeared as the ground beneath them eroded away. Drivers who had driven these roads earlier in the day couldn't even recognize them when they tried to come back. Cars were left stranded midstream, just sitting there with their hazard lights blinking in the brown water. We saw video after video showing the exact same scene. Flooded intersections, floating trash cans, and vehicles being pushed sideways by currents that looked shallow but carried tremendous force. For the engineers and emergency managers, this was the absolute nightmare scenario. It was multiple points of failure happening all at the exact same time. You had a washed-out bridge here, a landslide there, and a collapsing road shoulder miles away.
What the hell?
How is this even possible?
It wasn't just rain anymore. We were watching the moment where our infrastructure hit the absolute limits of physics, and the storm won. And caught right in the middle of this collapse were ordinary families. They thought they were prepping for Christmas, not a disaster. You had parents loading up the car with gifts and groceries, only to have their phones light up with emergency alerts. Some folks were already on the highway trying to get to relatives when traffic just hit a wall, and the GPS turned into a sea of red. Others were home decorating, only to look out the window and watch water creeping across the yard, inching closer and closer to the front door. Up in Lytle Creek, that washed-out bridge didn't just stop traffic. It literally tore families apart. You had relatives standing on opposite sides of a raging river they couldn't cross, just waving at each other. Kids were asking why grandma couldn't come over, and adults were trying to come up with answers while secretly worrying about how long they'd be stuck. In Wrightwood, tourists faced a totally different reality. Those cozy winter cabins turned into unplanned shelters. The power flickered, the Wi-Fi died, and the roads just vanished under mud and debris. Parents were counting diapers and bottles of baby formula, calculating exactly how many hours they had left. Families started rationing food, turning Christmas dinner into whatever they could scrape together from the pantry. Instead of snow play and hot chocolate, they were sitting in the dark, listening to the constant drum of rain and the sound of emergency helicopters overhead. The elderly were hit the hardest. For some, getting to medical appointments or refilling prescriptions became impossible once the roads failed. But that's when we saw the community step up. Neighbors were knocking on doors, checking pulse oximeters, sharing generators, and making sure the heaters stayed on. People were carrying pets to shelters right alongside their suitcases and Christmas presents. All across the region, Christmas plans weren't just changed. They were erased and rewritten by the storm in real time. The one thing everyone felt was uncertainty. Nobody knew when the bridges would be fixed, when the roads would reopen, or when the next band of heavy rain would hit. But they knew what they had to do. Stick together, stay safe, and just get through the night. But as the flooding got worse, one painful pattern kept repeating. But, there was one big problem that kept coming up. People severely underestimated the water. Despite all the barricades, the flashing signs, and the constant alerts buzzing on their phones, drivers just kept testing their luck on flooded roads. They just assumed their trucks or SUVs were big enough to handle it. We've all heard that phrase, turn around, don't drown, right? But in the heat of the moment, a lot of folks felt like that advice was for someone else. Unfortunately, the reality check hit fast. What looked like a harmless, shallow puddle turned out to be a deep, fast-moving channel. Engines stalled out. Tires lost their grip. Suddenly, heavy vehicles were being lifted up and pushed sideways like they were toys. In several spots, rescue crews arrived to find cars partially submerged, with the occupants clinging to the doors or standing on their rooftops in the freezing rain, just waiting for help. First responders kept talking about the same challenge over and over again. It only takes 12 to 18 inches of moving water to sweep a vehicle away, but most people just don't realize that until it's happening to them. Swiftwater rescue teams had to deploy everything they had: ropes, life vests, and inflatable boats to pull people to safety. Helicopters were hovering over canyons and river crossings where the roads had completely vanished, hoisting up stranded residents who couldn't walk out on their own. Firefighters even had to form human chains just to reach people stuck in deceptively strong currents. Every single rescue took time, manpower, and serious risk. And the crazy part was, while crews were working on one scene, dispatch was already ringing with new calls coming in from somewhere else. Some of these rescues ended in grateful hugs. Sure, but others carried a much harder lesson. That one bad decision puts not only the driver in danger, but the rescuers, too. Officials were practically begging the public to stay home unless travel was absolutely essential, reminding everyone that no destination and no holiday plan is worth a life. In the end, these rescues proved a simple truth about floods. Water doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about the size of your vehicle, it doesn't care if you have four-wheel drive, and it certainly doesn't care about your confidence. When the road disappears beneath a moving river, the only safe choice is to turn around so you can live to drive another day. While families across the country were sitting down to their holiday dinners, thousands of first responders here in Southern California were out in the thick of the storm, soaked, exhausted, and still moving. We're talking about firefighters, sheriff's deputies, CHP officers, medics, and search and rescue volunteers. We saw bridges fail, roads crumble, and the lights go out. But through all that chaos, one thing really shone through: the way these communities rallied together when the rain just wouldn't quit. You had neighbors splitting their food supplies, strangers dropping off diapers, and first responders pulling shifts right through the holidays just to keep everyone breathing. Look, the rain is eventually going to stop and the cleanup is going to start. But we can't let the lessons from this storm wash away with the water. Take flood warnings seriously. Never, ever drive through moving water. Keep that emergency kit packed and ready. And please remember, when you see a road closed sign, it isn't just an inconvenience. It's a barrier put there to save your life. If you got something out of this video, please go ahead and hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe. That way you won't miss our future coverage on major storms, floods, blizzards, and other extreme weather events across the US. Your support really helps this channel grow and reach the folks who care about staying prepared. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever been through a flood, a mudslide, or a storm that completely wrecked your holiday plans? Or maybe, what is the one safety rule you swear by now after living through severe weather? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might actually help save someone else next time. Stay prepared, take care of each other, and I'll catch you in the next one.